If money affects your life in any way, Money Making Sense will talk about it. Be financially healthy, wealthy, and wise. Here's your host, Heather Kelly.
Welcome to Money Making Sense, the show that talks about all things money. Today, we are talking about those gadgets you may be buying for the holidays during the Black Friday sales. They could be hacking you. Joining me today is Chris Willis. He is Chief of Design at Domo. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Heather. I'm excited to be here.
I have been hearing a lot, especially during the pandemic. If you still have a job right now, mostly it's because you generally work in an office and you're able to transition to home and you're using Zoom or whatever your company has to stay connected with your coworkers. But that's not the only bit of technology that we have in our houses. Like I have the Alexa Dots. I have a smart television. I opted not to get smart appliances because I just thought that was a little much. But if I have all of this technology, what I'm hearing from a lot of people, in fact, one of our big stories today is a classroom, a middle school, 7th grade classroom got hacked by somebody who showed pornography to these 13-year-old kids. First of all, how does technology get hacked? Let's start there.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what, Heather, what you're talking about today is super relevant. We've all of a sudden, most of us have found ourselves, at home, surrounded by our technology. And, because of this technology, it's keeping us connected with our coworkers and our communities, maybe in new kinds of ways. But to your point, the more technology we have around us, the more vulnerable we potentially become, right? There's an opportunity for every device that we put in our home to become hacked. And I think, there's a lot that we as consumers need to sort of take on as personal responsibility in the same way that we handle our finances, right? We can't expect everyone else to do our finances. In the same way, we sort of have to learn a lot about cybersecurity and take a lot of our responsibility for staying secure in our homes with our new technologies upon ourselves.
Okay, you and I actually are talking over Zoom today.
Mm-hmm.
How would somebody else invade our conversation, invade our Zoom meeting, and start saying that the stock market is plummeting when it's actually at its highest point ever at the moment? How would that happen?
Well, every sort of video conferencing software relies upon having secure passwords, right, and secure accounts. So there are a number of different ways, and I can't speak specifically to Zoom and their specific security settings. That's something they typically guard very closely. But where it starts is usually having a secure password and account. Unless somebody can hack your account, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to hack your Zoom call. As well, you can do password protection on your Zoom calls and other conferences. Sometimes there's this idea in cybersecurity around privacy through obfuscation. It's a kind of a big word, but what it really means is the way that a call might be sort of identified and shared with someone else is with a very long sort of complicated code. And the idea is that these codes are so hard to sort of figure out on your own, kind of like, think of it as your credit card code, right? Like you have a credit card number and, you would think that's kind of a security risk. Why can't someone just start typing in random numbers into, your e-commerce site? Well, the reason is those numbers have a very specific sort of sequence to them. And in the same way, a lot of these sort of digital conferencing applications have the same too. So that's where you get issues like what they might call Zoom bombing, where people sort of guess and maybe they've kind of hacked, or someone has shared a insecure link that didn't have a password on it. So the first way to protect yourself really starts at home. It starts with you choosing very secure passwords, not sharing that information with anyone else. And if you like, we can talk a little bit about some of the techniques for creating secure passwords. And then also changing your passwords on a regular basis. Sometimes we, every time there's a change in daylight savings, you change the batteries in your fire alarm, right, in your home. Well, we might have to do the same sort of things when it comes to our passwords on our phones, our apps, maybe even our TVs. in the future.
I know you are in technology. You work for Domo, so you do a lot of tech stuff. And I think, I'm going to figure out if and when he has meetings to talk about the latest and greatest, and I can get in on it. If I know your email address, I could go to Zoom, type that in, and then just start doing passwords. And, you seem like a pretty simple guy, so you probably did like Zoom 99 or something as your password, right?
No, I hope not.
But that's basically, there are computer bots to kind of, if you're a hacker, that sort of just go through passwords really quickly. But yes. Basically, if I just wanted to do that, I could just go to zoom.com, type in your email address, and then just start figuring out what you would have done for your password, like your pet's name or something.
Sure. So yes, at its very basic level, that's exactly what password bots do. You have an account and you just try passwords after password, and there are in the dark, what they call the dark web, maybe less than legitimate sites out there. There are lists of millions of the most common passwords, and it's unfortunate because you do see studies come out every so often that show that 123 password is actually a password people use.
Right.
And, they do use what we would call just dictionary words, which are words like, dance, dog, sister, mother, spouse, names of people, right? There are things like that. So these are really well understood ways to hack people's accounts. And so what that means, I think, for us as sort of consumers who have to sort of take cybersecurity more seriously, is that we need to try to not be very obvious. And there are some very simple ways to approach that maybe you haven't really thought of. One would be make your password a lot longer. So one of the things that these bots do is they sort of have to go through every conceivable set of characters, right? Every word in the dictionary, every combination of words of the dictionary, combinations of uppercase, lowercase, because the passwords consider those different things. So that's a tremendous amount of work. That said, there are some machines out there, computers that access a tremendous amount of processing power and can work through these things very, very quickly. But the longer your password is, the better. Adding some random element to it, it makes it even more secure because random characters are not found in any dictionary. And then I think one of the big challenges is really a usability challenge, which is these things become hard for us to remember. So they're not very expensive, but maybe subscribing to a reputable password management software like 1Password is money well spent. My wife and I did that a few years ago. It's very much. It's like $4 a month. And we have all of our passwords stored in there. They're all encrypted. And we use a very strong password for that application so that we don't have to write passwords down or rely upon really easy to remember passwords, which tend to be the ones that are the easiest to break. So that's how I would approach that problem. And I think just doing the simple stuff and changing your passwords regularly would reduce a lot of cybercrime overnight.
Okay, I'm a cheapskate. I don't want to pay $4 a month for times that by 12 months. You're looking at $48. That's money. So what if I did make it a longer password, and if you throw in a few characters that I know I can remember, but use that one complicated password for every single website that I have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's better in some ways, but it's not going to make you ultimately more secure. And the reason is hackers understand that is a common pattern that people follow. They tend to use simple passwords. They tend to use passwords that are based on personal information that might be easily found on the web or on your Facebook page. And people tend to use what they think is maybe a complex password or one that's hard to crack, which in reality might not be. But people tend to use the same password over and over again. Those password managers, among other things, will check to make sure that you're not using the same password twice. As well, they also scan the dark web for passwords that have been hacked. So they will check to see if that password has been used in a breach, a security breach somewhere else. And this is one that is really important. It's a little technical sounding, but the bigger, more reputable online sources use this. Applications like Google, for example, for your Google Mail, is they allow something called two-factor authentication. And what that means is that when you sign in your password, even if your password is not the most secure password, two-factor authentication will make your account far harder to crack into because it will send you a text. And that text might be a code that you paste into another field or an app on your phone that would say, is this definitely you? Someone is trying to access your account, allow that account to be accessed or not. So there are definitely some new and very powerful security features that are becoming much more common. But the way I would justify it is that, yes, maybe $4 a month is a gallon or two of gas that you'd be spending. But think of the insurance it gives you, right? If your identity is hacked or the payment info from your application has been breached, that's going to cost you a lot more than $48 or $50 a month to rectify. It could burden you for years.
Yes.
So I find it money well spent.
We are going to take a break, but when we come back with Chris Willis, he's the Chief of Design at Domo. When we come back, we will go into why you want to prevent being hacked.
It's the story of an American held in a dark Venezuelan prison.
They're saying that they want to kill me. They're saying that they want me as their guarantee.
I'm Becky Bruce. I spent the last year working on Hope in Darkness. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to Money Making Sense, the show that if it affects your life in any way, we're talking about it. Today, we are talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and what it's doing in your home. Oh my God, they're coming after me. Joining me today is Chris Willis. He is the Chief of Design at Domo. So welcome back, Chris.
Well, thank you.
All right. We described in the last segment basically what this technology does for us and why hackers are trying to get into it. But if a hacker hacks my email account, I mean, could they really find, aside from emails to my mother where I'm like, oh, that was the worst thing you've ever done to me, mother. How dare you? I mean, aside from that, what could a hacker really get from my emails?
So getting your email hacked, if that's ever happened to you or someone you know, is not fun. And it's extremely precarious. So we put a lot of ourselves in our emails, right? Anyone who gets access to your email address would know a lot of intimate details about you and a lot of details that could be used to hack other apps or accounts that you have. Because as we talked about earlier, a lot of times we use some of those personal details to, set up passwords, or you might have account or financial information that you've sent maybe to a tax preparer or an accountant or to a family member or someone else. So, I think when it comes to, your security, and if you were going to change your password and really make that secure, I would start with your email account, whatever your email app is, and make sure that is the most secure.
Wow.
Use a really secure password and use two-factor authentication, because with that information, that just opens up the ability for a hacker to steal your identity, right? Like many times, let's say your account is hacked, or you're trying to reset a password on another account. Where do you get the information to validate that that account can be reset? Usually it's through your primary email address. So if you lose access to that, or someone has access to it and maybe you don't realize it, that's a very dangerous situation. So I would not mess around with your email account. I would make that the most secure, and I would use the most secure sort of email service you can find.
Yeah.
That's a big, in fact, email accounts, as we saw in the 2016 election, can affect election outcomes.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's right.
That was an email break.
Yeah, I just refinanced my home 2 months ago, and I emailed Social Security number, You name it, I got emailed my W-2s, everything to my finance person. So yeah, so if they found that in my email, a hacker could then go in and find my bank account. And guess what? I could log into my bank account a week from now, and there's no money there.
That's right. And they could also impersonate you, right? That's one of the things is that if someone hacks into your email account, it's not necessarily obvious that they did. So, you might be, sort of spied upon, and that information could be used for lots of nefarious things. So that is the treasure trove. That is the grand prize for any hacker. I think an email account.
One of the most common things I've seen is all of a sudden I get a phone call or a message somewhere else going, if you got an email from me that wasn't mine, somebody hacked my account. And then so a spammer was able to use that and then just send out ads for stuff or, oh, I'm in trouble, please send me money. And you think it's your grandma who did that.
Right. Yeah. Those spam attacks, honestly, are probably the most benign. I mean, if that's all that happened, you are lucky, because spammers have lots of different ways of getting email addresses and trying to impersonate other people. They don't need all of that data. Again, I think there's a lot of pain out there. I think a lot of people have been hacked and you just don't know about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people end up, trying to get their credit rating back, right? Because someone went in there and was able to impersonate them and open up a new account, or maybe, empty another account. And like you said, you are putting your most sensitive financial information many times in that email account. So yes, I think, it's unfortunate that we kind of live in that sort of world, but it's an easy crime for cyber hackers to commit. They don't have to know where you are. They don't have to break into a house. They can do it all from, the comfort of their living room.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of the comfort of my living room, let's say nobody got into my email account, but I have a smart TV, which when I set it up, I had to, set up an account for my smart TV. The same with my Alexa devices. How does somebody go about hacking that, or can they?
These devices that we have in our homes, they're wonderful. They're sophisticated. They learn about us constantly. But in doing so, the security of them becomes far more important, right? So every time we add a new device to our house, I think that's kind of an opportunity to potentially be hacked, or to maybe give away information that you don't realize you're giving away. So let's talk about, let's say TVs. This is clearly the year where people, if they haven't bought a TV, they're probably buying one this year.
Yeah.
And all of these TVs, are considered what we call smart TVs, or you might say, TVs with IQ. And it's not necessarily clear what that is, but what you're seeing are TVs that are trying to be sort of your entertainment center, right? And your communication center and your convenience center. So they might have the ability to understand your voice. So Alexa could be built in, Siri could be built in. Maybe there are things like recommendations for what to watch next. There's a lot that these devices, like your TVs, are learning about you. As you watch TV, they're kind of watching you, which is kind of a strange thing.
I'm not going to ever be naked again in front of my television.
It's sad we even have to consider that, but yeah, maybe. But there's one thing that TVs. This is something that's kind of new, and honestly, I didn't know a lot about it until recently. I bought a new TV, and as I was going through the settings, one of the things I do with new devices is I try to make sure that I'm not giving back any information I don't feel comfortable with. That said, many of these devices sort of have all of the defaults turned on to say, yeah, share everything with the company that sold you the TV. Yeah. Many times there are third parties that have arrangements, so your data might be going to people and organizations you had no idea would be getting it. So, for example, one thing that's been very popular, and this is a trade-off you're going to see just going on and on for many years to come, which is the trade-off between convenience and your privacy. So TVs that might be called different things, but they have something called automatic content recognition, or ACR. And every TV calls it maybe something a little different. But that's one of the things you kind of want to turn off. What ACR is is your TV kind of watching what you watch. It will actually look at portions of the screen to find out what you're watching, which is very sophisticated and frankly a little scary, right? So you might be watching a newscast and the TV doesn't necessarily have to know exactly what channel you were looking at. It can kind of match up what you're watching with a giant database of everything that's been watched by everyone else. The reason they do this is because, one, it's very helpful from a marketing standpoint, right, to know what you're watching. From a convenience standpoint, it's the thing that allows them to say, no matter what you're watching on your TV, whether that's something that you put in like a DVD or, something you're streaming on Netflix, it's a way for them to provide very helpful and relevant recommendations for what to watch next. But it's one of many examples of where it's not even like being worried about being hacked. Your data and information about, your personal viewing habits already is being observed. If you're comfortable with that, that's great. I think for the most part, people don't even know they're being observed in that way. So that's one of the first things I look for as a consumer is, go through the settings, do the boring stuff, right? It feels like sometimes sort of like doing your taxes and, maybe look online. There's a lot of resources online where people have said, if you get this TV, it's great picture, but I would turn off these 3 different settings.
Okay, well, not that isn't a little creepy in and of itself, but as you said earlier, that's sort of one of the more benign things that can happen. I've done stories on people who had security cameras, not only on the outside of their home, but also inside. So if I'm at work, I can just log on my phone and see what Fido is doing during the day.
Yes.
But we've had reports where somebody has managed to hack into it and they can watch what's happening. And even put their voice through. Some guy was talking, the 9-year-old had a camera in her room, and somebody hacked into it and started talking to the 9-year-old girl.
Yes. So again, whenever you bring new devices into your home, in a sense, you're also opening up the opportunity to bring countless strangers into your home. A lot of this, though, does start with, as we talked about earlier, taking your password accounts very seriously, making sure that you're using and changing your passwords and watching the activity on your accounts. There are ways to see, did you indeed log in? I think you might see this if you use Google quite a bit. It'll say, hey, we've noticed some activity. And if that's not you, let us know. Right. Yeah. So I think there's a few ways to do this. I think there's, 5 or 6 ways to address this. One would be, again, keep using strong passwords, right? On your Wi-Fi, on the apps. So people can hack things like those devices mostly through insecure passwords on the app that you're using to watch yourself, right? So someone might download it, they found your password, or they just tried something. And that's very creepy, as we talked about. Make sure that the password on your Wi-Fi is as secure as possible. Your Wi-Fi can broadcast the name of the Wi-Fi. Don't put personal information in that. A lot of times I'll be, walking through the neighborhood and I'll see on my phone, it'll pop up, oh, here's the Smith's Wi-Fi. I'm like, well, I know who those people are. And now I know that's their Wi-Fi. And I now know a lot more about them than just say an anonymous name, or don't broadcast your Wi-Fi at all. Maybe you have something in your house for guests that say, here's our guest Wi-Fi and here's our sort of private Wi-Fi for family members. So that's a biggie. Buy your devices from trusted companies who take security seriously. And, turn off the device reporting. If there's things that are being sent to marketers, I think companies are now starting to be more clear about that, although not completely transparent.
Yeah.
And then I as I said before, do the boring stuff. We love convenience, right? We love the ability to just turn something on and it just works, and we don't think about it after that. You really do need to take this a little bit more seriously and take sort of personal responsibility for your cybersecurity.
I would prefer to just buy one system that then makes every other AI device in my home secure? So can I get on Get Smart, the cone of silence that I just buy one device and it covers all of my AI devices?
So I think that's a great question. And I would buy that device if it existed. No, hands down. I wouldn't even wait till Black Friday deals. I would buy that device. Unfortunately, there isn't. All of these devices are very diverse. They come from many different manufacturers. They have many different types of software running on them. And so it kind of comes back to just doing the proper sort of security tactics to keep yourself safe. And then, I think the best thing would be to kind of consider the trade-offs. So these high-tech gadgets that are connected to the internet and are constantly collecting data, sending it back, these are just exploding. But it doesn't mean that you have to have everything connected to the internet. From a very practical standpoint, do you want to use an app to run everything in your home, or apps to run everything in your home, right? Are you substituting one problem for another when frankly, a good old-fashioned solution would work? That's one of those things where I think we rush into this. A lot of times technology leaps ahead of our understanding or our sense of the implications. So, I would say start slowly, use the convenience where it makes the most sense. So, let's say you start with a smart thermostat, like a Google Nest thermostat. Okay. How does that work? Is it useful? But you don't necessarily have to go out and say, okay, now I want every light bulb and I want a robotic vacuum and I want AI in my lawn sprinklers. Maybe it's okay to have one or two dry spots in your grass during the summer, as opposed to having to, potentially open up yet another way for a cyber criminal to attack you.
The one that kills me is the Wi-Fi connected refrigerator and oven.
Yeah.
I'm like, really?
Yes.
Open the door. Or push a button for the oven. Anyway. One last question. Chris, you are a chief of design. So there are universal remotes for your television, stereo, all of that. You need to create a universal AI device to protect all my other AI devices in my house. That's my homework for you.
I know. I love it. This is my next startup idea. So I'm on
it. There you go. All right. One tip I wanted to give when we were talking in that first segment, keeping all of your financial stuff secure so that nobody else can open up a line of credit in your name. I have put a freeze on all of my credit reports. And that means that if somebody did get a hold of my social security number and tried to open up credit card, they could not. They'd be like, oh, what's the password? Take the freeze off.
That's a great point. In fact, we did the same thing this year again, just make it harder for people, right? Like, hackers are going to take the path of least resistance. They're going to go for the accounts that use 1234 as their password. They're going to go to the accounts that don't use two-factor authentication or, have not put locks on their credit. In fact, my wife and I did that, as we started sort of buckling down and taking cybersecurity a little more seriously. And then we went to go refinance our house and they're like, oh, we can't refinance it because your credit's locked. I'm like, oh, it works. We were excited.
Very good. All right. Chris Willis, again, you are the Chief of Design at Domo, and you've helped us understand why it's so important to have good passwords on any electronic device we bring into our home.
Well, Heather, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Stay safe.
Thanks for listening. You can email me with any questions or topics you want to hear about at hkelly@ksl.com. That's HKELLY@ksl.com. And because this is Money Making Sense, you can subscribe for free on Spotify, Overcast, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, and you'll never miss another episode.
Thanks for being a Money Making Sense listener. Follow your common sense on the social media. Money Making Sense on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Hi, this is Stephanie Palmer, KSL News Radio Director of Sales, and I hope you're enjoying this podcast. Did you know that last month alone, KSL Radio had more than 200,000 podcast downloads? If your business is trying to reach more people, we can help. Let's talk about it. Text the word podcast to 57500. Thanks. Now get back to your show.